Is Vancouver the perfect city? You know, it's funny. So many people, when they realize that I live in Vancouver, make the assumption that I must love the outdoors. And it's true. It's part of what I love about living in Vancouver, and it's part of what draws so many people to this beautiful city. But it's not the only thing. In today's video, we're going to get deep into all the things that I really love about living in Vancouver, and you might love about living here as well. Be sure to let me know which one of these are your favorites, and at the end, let me know if I missed any. Stay tuned. My name is Sebastian Albrecht, the Living in Vancouver, BC team, and welcome back to the channel. If you are new here, this channel is all about moving to and living in Vancouver. I put out videos just like this one every single week, and this week we're getting into the things that I love about living in Vancouver. And number one is the airport. Yes, that's right. It's just a piece of infrastructure, but it truly is spectacular. In fact, Vancouver International Airport won the award as the best airport in North America for 12 years straight. Won it in 2007, and then every year from 2010 till 2022. And I think the airport really is an impressive structure on the inside. I remember it in its days gone by when it was definitely not something that was all that impressive. It was kind of dark and dingy and dirty. But these days it is really spectacular. It's big, bright, open. There's incredible West Coast native art all throughout the airport. There's rivers, there's fish in there, there's canoes, and there's gorgeous sculptures. The other day when I was coming back from vacation, there was even musicians playing. It's a really welcoming environment, and honestly, it's a great introduction to the West Coast. But if you live here, it's a really phenomenal connection to the rest of the world because we have one of the busiest airports in Canada and one of the greatest connections to the other parts of the world that aren't here. And in Canada, everything is pretty far away. So it is a really important part. We are able just to go out. It takes me about 20 minutes to get to the airport. And then from there, I can go to Hong Kong. I can go to Tokyo. I can go to Fiji, Australia, London, Madrid, wherever it is that I want to go in North America, in Europe, in Asia, Australasia. I guess the only place that we don't really have direct flights, as far as I know, is Africa. I mean, we might, maybe somebody correct me, but pretty much anywhere I want to go around in the world, I can get to from our airport, which I think is pretty spectacular. Plus, it's so incredibly beautiful. The thing I love about Vancouver, number two, is that people come and visit you. And one of the criticisms you're going to hear about Vancouver is the lack of connection, the difficulty making friends. But the truth is, if you have friends, if you come here with friends from somewhere else, they are going to want to come to visit you because Vancouver is one of those destinations that everybody wants to see at least once in their lifetime, and they may not want to leave. There's so many people, my parents included, they thought they were only staying for a year, but they fell in love. So they fell in love with the city, I should say. They were already in love with one another. But that is the reality of this city. And so if you're moving here from somewhere else, and that's the experience for so many, let's say you're from Toronto and you move to Vancouver, you are going to be inundated with friends and family that want to come and visit you. And I think that is pretty amazing because you're in a place that maintains connections. The alternative is to move to a place, I don't know, somewhere less desirable. I'm not going to pick on any particular city, but if you move to a place that's less desirable, the only thing that's going to draw those people to you is you. And that's going to be a little more challenging. The truth is, when the place is as incredible as Vancouver is, everybody wants to come and see you. And it's a much easier way to maintain those connections. And the best part is they won't stay forever because they do have to go home because they won't want to sleep on your couch forever or on the uncomfortable second bed that you have. Just don't make it too comfortable for them. And it's an absolutely perfect situation. Another one of my favorite things about Vancouver is its diversity. And I'm talking at the moment about its ethnic diversity. It is one of the most ethnic cities in an ethnically diverse country. We are a country of immigrants, and Vancouver is no exception, but it leads the country, or it is at the top end of diversity in the country. Over 55% of the city identify as an ethnic minority. There's something like 244 different cultural groups self-identified in the city of Vancouver, in the Metro Vancouver region, and over 50% of Vancouver's population was born outside of Canada. So all of that brings incredible color, incredible life, incredible diversity, and makes Vancouver a really interesting place to live, with so many people coming from so many different experiences and coming together to live peacefully and cooperatively together. That's something that I really, really love about Vancouver. And the fourth thing that I love about Vancouver is the food. And for a very long time, the food in Vancouver has been of a very high quality. We definitely have a very strong foodie culture in Vancouver. There's a lot of people that love spending a lot of time and a lot of money on going out. And so that's reflected in the quality and the offerings and the diversity of offerings. And again, this does go back to diversity. You can find so many amazing restaurants from so many different ethnicities, so many different walks of life in this city. And just within walking distance of me, I mean, there's a sort of a North American pub, there's Japanese, there's Caribbean, there's Vietnamese, there's Filipino, there's East Indian. And then when we talk about those cultures, it's not that there's only one style, let's say, of Chinese food. There is multitudes of different kinds of Chinese food, different kinds of Filipino food, different kinds of Vietnamese food, different kinds of Indian food. The offerings are really endless. And no matter what it is that you feel, whatever you have a hankering for, you're going to be able to find it in Vancouver. Now, it does lean a little more towards the Asian, does lean a little more towards seafood than anything else, but it is such a blessing on this city. And I love food personally. I love eating food. I don't like making it so much. So it's something that I really enjoy. And it's something that Anthony Bourdain recognized about Vancouver, about its food scene, about its foodie culture. And it's also something now that we are being recognized by Michelin. And there are Michelin-starred restaurants in Vancouver, and they're not just in downtown Vancouver. In fact, just down the street from me is Published, which is an amazing restaurant. I have to say it's a little beyond my typical budget, so it's got to be a very special occasion if we're going to go there. But it is one of, I think there's 9 Michelin-starred restaurants in Vancouver, and more restaurants are kind of vying for that level. Now that that bar has been set in the last couple of years, I was just at what would normally be, I don't know, just a dark bar of some kind, but it is a sushi, or it is a raw bar called Amma, and it's right above Ernest Ice Cream and a Greek restaurant. And that place was way too cool for me. I was definitely out of my element, but that's the kind of place that has been popping up around Vancouver in different neighborhoods aside from Yaletown or Cole Harbour. But there really is an exceptional level of quality and also an expectation from the public on the kind of things that are being offered. And I remember my parents came from the hospitality industry, and something that they always used to have an issue with was the quality of the food, the quality of the service, and that it just wasn't on par with what was available internationally. Now, Vancouver leads in so many ways in food in particular. It's perhaps not the best seen globally, but it ranks up there as one of the places that you want to visit and you want to enjoy some of the offerings that Vancouver has. They are top notch. Another thing that I love about Vancouver would be its relaxed vibe. And Vancouver is kind of known as having a chill and relaxed vibe. I mean, I have talked about the way that people dress as an example. There isn't an expectation that people wear suits. You can see the way that I am dressed right now. I'm wearing a hoodie. And while I may not wear a hoodie when I meet clients out in the field, I'm certainly not going to be wearing a suit most of the time. And that's not the expectation that many of my clients will have. In fact, it might make many of them uncomfortable if I was too well dressed. And that's kind of a really good indication of what the culture is like here. People are all a little more relaxed. And in fact, I've told this story before, but a long time ago, I dated somebody from Toronto, and she came here for business and was opening a business here in Vancouver. And she only lasted, I think it was about 6 months, around 20 years ago. And at the time, what she said to me is, I miss the hustle of Toronto. This place is way too chill for me. People are there is no hustle culture. People aren't like really driving forward in the way that she was used to in Toronto, where people might work until midnight. In Vancouver, quite often people are working to live, right? So I've also talked quite a bit about the way that people are prioritizing a work-life balance, the way that people prioritize mental health as well as their physical health. And so on a beautiful sunny day, you're going to see a lot of people who are probably supposed to be working outside, enjoying the outdoors, and probably with the blessing of their boss. And that's just the vibe of Vancouver. Everything is a little more relaxed. So if all this talk about just how great Vancouver is getting to you and you want to move here, well, lucky for you, I'm a real estate agent that has helped hundreds of families just like you move to Vancouver, and I can help you as well. Whenever you're ready, there's never any pressure. My contact information is going to be right up there on the screen. Reach out. We can begin the conversation of moving you and your family and buying a home here in Vancouver. Let's get back to the video. Mild weather is something that so many people really get drawn to Vancouver about, both in the summer and the winter. We have reasonable spring and we have a reasonable fall. They're a good length. They're not extreme. But when you get into winter, as an example, we don't have the stereotypical winter. We don't have tons of snow and we don't have really cold temperatures. I mean, typically our temperature is around 5 degrees, I would say. And really what we're benefiting from warm currents in the Pacific Ocean that sort of mitigate and make our temperatures milder. The further inland you go, and so into the suburbs, and if you're going out to Abbotsford or Chilliwack, you're going to find that temperatures are less mild, and you're also going to find that you're going to get more snow because the temperature in winter, as an example, might be colder. So we may only get a couple snowfalls a year, and that's something I find people from other parts of Canada really, really enjoy. And conversely, in the summer months, what you're going to find is that we're also not incredibly hot, and other parts of Canada can get really stinking hot, get lots of bugs. That's another thing. We don't get a lot of bugs, but our temperatures are much milder. So we might average around 20 degrees. Sure, there is the odd case where we go into the 30s, and typically that's been around a week a year. Last year was a relatively mild summer, and in fact, this winter has been a very mild winter. We have had temperatures now sort of hovering around 10 degrees most of the time. We're getting a little bit chillier now that we're in mid-January, but also in the summer, we didn't have that real heat that we've seen in the previous years where we had an extended period of about 10 to 14 days in the 30s. This summer, we didn't have it. In fact, I think I might have turned my air conditioning on twice this year, maybe, if that. And then in the summer months, you really don't get any rain. And that is also something to keep in mind. It's one of the driest parts of Canada in summer months. And if you want to know what the rain is like, what the weather is like, I'm going to link up a video that I just did recently right there for you so you can watch that afterwards. But the long and the short of it is that Vancouver has a really mild climate. And that's something so many people love about living in Vancouver. The natural beauty is really obvious. It's going to be out there all over the place. Whether you live here or you're thinking of moving here, you've probably thought about just how beautiful Vancouver is, but it is hard to describe unless you're actually here just how stunning of a location this is, and truly how lucky we are to be surrounded basically at every turn, whether it's the ocean, the river, the mountains, the scenery, the trees, the nature surrounding you at every single turn. And yes, we live in a big city. There's roughly 3 million people that live in Metro Vancouver, but we have really quick and easy access to the outdoors. And I'm not just talking about a park in the middle of the city, say like Central Park in Burnaby or like Stanley Park in Vancouver. And those are wonderful, aside from all the small little community parks scattered throughout all the cities in Metro Vancouver. But what I'm talking about is truly getting into nature. And this is, depending on where you're from, kind of hard to imagine. If you're from Europe, as an example, I remember hiking in Europe and being on a trail with my parents that had been washed out, and we thought we were in the middle of nowhere, and then we come across, within a few minutes of having this near-death experience, this little alpine hut in the middle of nowhere, and there's like 50 people enjoying beer and drinking and laughing and having food. There's a running kitchen in this alpine meadow up above the little town that we were visiting. And that kind of thing isn't the way that our nature is. You go into nature that is 20 minutes, 30 minutes from the downtown core, and you could quite literally not see another human being, depending on the trail. I mean, there are some that are more highly worn than others, but you really could, if you didn't want to, go in a direction that you will not see another human being for hundreds and hundreds of kilometers. And really, until you come around on the other side, I don't know, in Russia or in China or in Europe, depending on how extreme you want to get and how much you want to avoid people. The point is that it is possible, and you can get in real trouble if you're not prepared for it. And there are people who wander into the mountains just behind Vancouver and do not return. And they think it's kind of like a walk in the park, but it really isn't. It's something that you want to be prepared for, you want to know what you're doing, and you want to let people know what you're doing as well. All of that being said, nature doesn't have to be scary. It's beautiful and it's wonderful, and it's something that I really do love about living in Vancouver. And the next thing that I really love about Vancouver, it's transportation network. And it is truly remarkable. We are lucky to have one of the best transit systems in all of North America. And I know people harp on it, and there's going to be people who disagree with me. But the truth is, if you're really upset with the way that things are in Vancouver, you may not have strong experiences in other North American cities. Places like, I don't know, Portland or Houston or Atlanta, in comparison to other North American cities, most of them, our transportation, our public transit system is absolutely phenomenal. And it's centered on the SkyTrain, which continues to expand. We're now completing a line along Broadway in Vancouver and also extending a line from through Surrey and into Langley as well. And that continues to be a very efficient way of moving people from one suburb to another. And then there's, of course, buses, and there's also the C bus, which crosses from North Vancouver into the downtown core. And that is such a beautiful little cruise in the morning. And it's just 15 minutes. It's a great way to connect those two cities. And it makes living in Lower Lonsdale in particular, or Lonsdale and North Vancouver, so much more enjoyable and so much easier for people who work downtown. But aside from the public transit system, which is relatively cheap, relatively clean, and incredibly efficient, and makes it really easy to get from one point to another, aside from all that, we also have amazing alternatives to driving a car, because driving a car in Vancouver can be a little bit of a hassle. As I've talked about in other videos, we do have a bit of an issue because geographically everything is relatively close together, but we're split by so many waterways. And I forget the exact number, but I think it is somewhere, we have over 30 bridges in Metro Vancouver and one tunnel. And it makes it difficult, especially if you're needing to move by car from one suburb to another and you have 1, 2, or 3 bridges to get you from point A to point B. And those really become bottlenecks. But the solution is to either not cross any bridges and then commute by car, or maybe just walk, or take something like the SkyTrain or the West Coast Express. And so there are increasingly phenomenal alternatives to driving. We are one of the cities that has adopted electric vehicles, most of all because we have relatively expensive gasoline and relatively cheap electricity, making it pretty desirable or it makes the equation to own an electric vehicle a simpler one. The math works out. Plus, there were some government incentives recently that encouraged that as well. And aside from that, we have Uber and Lyft and taxis. Of course, we have bike shares, we have scooter shares, we have car shares. We have also just a place that is relatively walkable. And that is a point I'm about to make. Another thing that I love about living in Vancouver. Yes, that's right. Walkability is definitely high on my list for things that I love about Vancouver. And so many cities, so many North American cities in particular, are not terribly walkable. The reason for it in Vancouver is it's the way that we developed. We were one of the few cities that did not build an inner city highway system coming out of the 60s and just sort of flattening the neighborhoods and the town centers that had developed organically over time. We let all that sit and maintain, and as a result, our downtown core has continued and has always been a desirable place to live, and it's increasingly a desirable place to live. But we also have these little village centers scattered throughout Vancouver. And I'm thinking of places like Dunbar and Kerrisdale and Point Grey and Kitsilano and Mount Pleasant and Commercial Drive and Main Street and Yaletown. I'm going back to downtown, and Hastings Sunrise. That's the one that I was trying to think of. So all of those are within the city of Vancouver, and they're all unique little neighborhoods where you could live and you may never need to leave the confines of that one little neighborhood because everything is within easy reach. You got restaurants, you got your bank, you got schools, you have places to work, you got beautiful homes. Everything that you can need to live a really nice life is within those neighborhoods. And they're very unique. They're the types of people that are drawn to live in Kitsilano are different from the people that live in Main Street, are different from the people that might live in Marpole. That was another area I didn't mention earlier. So it really offers a unique perspective on the way that you can live in Vancouver and an opportunity to find the right place that is right for you. But I want to get back to that idea of walkability. It is something that all of these neighborhoods had. And it's, I would say, until the last 15 or 20 years, it was a little bit unique to the city of Vancouver, where many of the suburbs lacked that walkability. But increasingly, the way that those suburbs are being developed, whether it is Port Moody or Coquitlam or New Westminster or Burnaby or Surrey or White Rock, all of these suburbs are developing core areas that are walkable, centers where all the shops and services are that people want, and they're building higher density around those hubs and better transportation links between them. So increasingly, it's not just the city of Vancouver or its cool, fun neighborhoods that are most walkable. It's something that you can have in so many of the suburbs. And coming to mind in particular right now is the Village, essentially the center of Port Moody, which is a beautiful place and a really exceptional place to live. And if you love the outdoors, if you want access to SkyTrain and just getting you downtown, but you don't want to live in the real hustle and bustle of the urban center of downtown Vancouver, a place like the center of Port Moody city is really an excellent option where you're going to see really phenomenal, great value, excellent schools, proximity to the outdoors, and proximity to downtown Vancouver as well. It's got everything that you could possibly hope for. And there's so many other examples I could get into, but this video would get way too long. One of the coolest things about Vancouver, I think, is that there really is something for everyone. I'm not sure if this is true of every city, but I know that it is true of Vancouver, that there's a real diversity of options. I kind of got into it a little bit just in that last segment talking about walkability and the neighborhoods, but it's true of all of Metro Vancouver that it can appeal to different people from different walks of life. And so many people think that Vancouver is a really liberal place. Like, I get called woke on this channel so often because of some of the things that I say about the culture of Vancouver. But the truth is, you have strong left-wing leanings in certain parts of Vancouver. Let's say areas like the West End as an example. And then you also have very strong right-leaning tendencies in others, like West Vancouver as an example. And other suburbs can be used as an example. So politically, no matter whether you are on the left, the right, or right in the middle, you're going to find a community where you're going to feel at home, and you don't have to feel like you're a little minority in a vast majority. Similar with weather. If you have a preference for drier weather or wetter weather, this is something I've talked about in some of the recent videos as well. There are parts of Metro Vancouver that get a lot of rain and really fit into the stereotype of this being a wet place, but there's also relatively dry parts of Metro Vancouver that don't see a lot of rain and get considerably more sunshine than the wetter parts. And so you can find the right fit for you. Or if you want to be close to mountains and love the outdoors that way, well, that's an option for you. But if you'd rather be in an area that's more oriented towards the ocean, you can have that too. Or if you want both, there's that option as well. And then when it comes to whether you are drawn to urban or rural, you have those options because you can live in downtown Vancouver, which is a urban modern city that compares to many urban global cities all around the world. I mean, it's not a huge city and it has some shortcomings because it's on the smaller side. You need to take into account when you're moving here, but there's also an option for you to live a rural lifestyle. And you can move to a place like Squamish or Mission, and you can have a much more rural, laid back lifestyle than the hustle and bustle of downtown. So I really think one of the great things about Vancouver is just how it can adapt to so many different people. And perhaps for me, this all kind of culminates in this idea that Vancouver is pretty much a Goldilocks city. It's the perfect city. And I asked that question at the outset, is Vancouver the perfect city? And in my opinion, it is. And I think for most people that come here and then stay here, they're making that decision. They feel that it is as well. I have to admit, it's not going to be perfect for everybody. If there are some things about Vancouver that bother you, I completely understand. It's not absolutely perfect, but it comes as close as I can possibly find. Vancouver has a lot of urban amenities. If you want to go out, if you want to party, if you want to see live music, see a good comedy show, if you want to go to a big sporting event, those things are all here. And then at the same time, you have nature at your doorstep. You're able to go for a walk along the seawall. You're able to go for a hike in Stanley Park or up Grouse Mountain, or head up to Squamish or to Pemberton for hiking in the backcountry up there. But you're also able to get onto the ocean. There are people, crazy enough, but people go swimming in Vancouver's harbor every single day of the year. It is possible. I would absolutely never do that. I'm a bit of a wimp when it comes to temperature. And so honestly, even on some of the hottest days in the summer, it's a bit of an ordeal for me to get into Vancouver's water, depending on the beach. But I prefer the beaches that are warmer, like Spanish Banks, where it's such a shallow beach where the water really warms up considerably and it's a bit of a bathtub. So for me, that's more my style. But that doesn't change the point that there are people who are much tougher than I am that are going in the water around here every day of the year and are doing so happily. So not just getting into the water, but on the water. And whether you're paddle boarding or sailing or motorboating or what have you, those options exist year round. And so you have that balance between that urban side, that big city side, but also that nature at your doorstep. And then I also mentioned sort of those rural options. And within pretty much just an hour of Vancouver, I mean, Squamish is about an hour. It is a much different vibe in Squamish or in Mission or Maple Ridge or Chilliwack, places like that, where there is a much slower pace of life and an orientation that is a little bit different than the downtown center. And if you're looking for that, you can find it. So in my mind, there's so much that the city has to offer, so many possibilities, that it really is the perfect city, this perfect balance between urban, rural, and nature, and all of those things that balance together to create this perfect environment for us to live. Something that I love about living in Vancouver. And another point that leads on from nature at your doorstep and ocean is the clean air and clean water that we have. And I really do think so many people take it for granted, but we can turn on the tap and drink right from the tap, and it's delicious water. I always question why people buy bottled water in a place like Vancouver. I mean, this isn't the place that you need to buy bottled water. And in fact, I personally find bottled water to be not as good as the tap water in Vancouver. And so we're lucky enough to have water that is soft and it comes from the mountains. It doesn't come from deep underground. And so that's part of the reason that it tastes really good. It can be a little bit challenging to get soap off of you because the water is so soft, but it is wonderful water to taste and it feels clean. And that is something that I am really, really grateful for. And at the same time, we also have exceptionally clean air. And we live in a place where, again, surrounded by nature, surrounded by so many trees, they're all doing their job and cleansing the air that we're doing our best to dirty. I mean, we do create a fair amount of pollution in a city, of course, and I have to recognize that. And you do see there are days in the summer months where there's a lot more stagnant air and we're not getting that big breeze coming off of the ocean. Then we can get an impact on our air quality, but that is a very limited time of the year. The other thing that I need to address would also be that something that has happened in recent years is more forest fires surrounding us in the interior of BC and in Washington state. And in the summer months, that has impacted our air quality as well. But that is very limited basis. And I don't think that is necessarily something that, even on the worst days, our air quality, well, maybe on the worst days, it's not great. But on the whole, our air quality is absolutely exceptional and far better than you're going to find just about anywhere in the world. And I've told this story before, but one thing that I noticed when I go to Hawaii is as soon as the doors open, you know that feeling of that pungent aroma that you can taste the life in the air? You can smell the tropical breeze. It's something that I love about going to Hawaii, but it's also an experience you can have coming to Vancouver. And I think people who are coming from drier places or more urban places, when they come to Vancouver, it's a really noticeable thing. When they unlock the door and break that seal and the fresh air comes rushing in, you can really sense the life and the moisture in the air. And that is really quite magical. So fresh air and amazing water are things that I am truly grateful for in Vancouver. Vancouver is also really safe, and that's something that so many people are drawn to Vancouver for, and people stay here because of that. In the grand scheme of things, globally, as we compare it around the world, Vancouver is one of the safest places you could possibly be. Now, it does have a higher crime rate compared to other Canadian cities, but we're comparing it to other Canadian cities. Canada is a real safe place to be. What we have in Vancouver tends to be petty crime. And I would say that we do tend to have an issue with crime in Vancouver that is petty, and that's related specifically to homelessness, drug addiction, mental illness. It's all related to that issue, something that we are struggling with and trying to deal with. So there are areas where, like, I'm not going to park a bike, I'm not going to lock my bike, I'm not going to leave anything in my car, and I'm not going to leave my car unlocked. Although people do choose to fight that crime by leaving their windows rolled down and their doors unlocked and just saying, hey, if you want something, take it. There's nothing to hide here. So in general, this is an incredibly safe place, and you're not going to walk around worried that you're going to get mugged or raped or kidnapped or carjacked. These aren't crimes that are rampant in Vancouver. And I personally feel like I can walk around, whether it's the downtown east side or it's Granville Street on a Saturday night or it's Main Street on a Tuesday evening. Like, it doesn't matter where in Vancouver, I feel comfortable walking and being out in public. And it's also reflected in society. I mean, all around Vancouver, you see people out and about and not terribly concerned about their own personal safety. And it's not just adults, but it's also children. And adults are letting their kids out to play. So in relative terms, this is a safe place. Yes, there are areas that I'm going to be a little more aware of my surroundings, but the truth is, the one place that most people will be concerned of is the downtown east side. And for the downtown east side, as an example, that's what most people are going to be thinking of as being a quote unquote dangerous place. The reality is that the people that live there are much more likely to be victims of crime than they are to perpetrate it themselves. And so I personally feel quite comfortable in the downtown east side. Yes, I am going to pay a little more attention when I am there than I would to my surroundings in other places. And having your head on a swivel, being just aware of your surroundings, those are ways that in any city help you be safe and prevent you from getting in trouble. And I would say that is one part of Metro Vancouver that you definitely want to be doing that. But it doesn't make the city unsafe. And our city, in my opinion, is incredibly safe. You just have to keep an eye on your bike. Education is a big draw for people. It's something that keeps a lot of people here, but our education system really is top notch. And it's something that I personally love about Vancouver. I don't worry about the quality of education that my children are going to get if they stay here. Our public education system is excellent. We don't have to send kids to private school. Our public system is provincially regulated, so the quality of it is very even from one neighborhood to another. The result is you can send your kids to the neighborhood school, and the wonderful thing in the city of Vancouver is that every elementary school is no more than 1.6 or 1.5 kilometers away. They are all over the place, so you can walk your kids to school. What's better than that? I think that's a phenomenal way to connect with your children. It's a phenomenal way to connect with your neighborhood. Something that I really personally love about living in Vancouver. But if you want to send your kids to private school, we also have really excellent private schools, anywhere from $10,000 roughly a year to $40,000 or $50,000 a year. So whatever your budget might be, if you have room in it for private school, you can find an excellent private school in Vancouver. And then of course we have post-secondary education, and that is centered around UBC in Vancouver and Simon Fraser University in Burnaby. And then we have another tier of universities throughout Metro Vancouver, places like Kwantlen and Langara and BCIT, amongst many others. So no matter what educational avenues you want to pursue or you're hoping for your children, this is a place where you're going to be really happy with the quality of education that your kids get. BC has one of the best education systems in Canada, and that is the reality of living here, that you get to take advantage of that. Of course, you have to pay your taxes to be able to take advantage of it, so perhaps the wrong choice of words, but it is an asset that you have when you live in Vancouver. One of the things that I'm most proud about living in Vancouver is its open-mindedness. And I think so many people that come here from different parts of the world or with different political views or different sexual leanings, they find a home in Vancouver. And I pointed this out in a couple of earlier points, but it really comes home to me in the way that people in Vancouver really are open to differences. And I find part of the reason, I think, is because of us all being from so many different places. I mean, as I said, over 50% of Vancouverites are not born here, and we all identify from roughly 244 different cultural groups. I mean, you kind of have to be open to differences to be able to live here. You know what I mean? And so whether you are far left leaning or far right leaning, or whether you are gay or straight or poly, I don't know, you're going to find a home here, and people really won't judge you for the way that you are. And I find in a world that is increasingly divisive and in a world that is increasingly at odds with one another, I still feel that Vancouver is a safe place for so many. And that's something that I truly am happy about. It's something that I really love about Vancouver. And really, honestly, it's something that I'm really, really proud of this city specifically. So once Vancouverites are done high-fiving and hugging their neighbors and just getting along with people with different cultures, they're probably going to go out and go for a run. They're going to be active. So physical activity and health, that's something that I also love about Vancouver, just how easy it is to do that. You're surrounded by people who generally prioritize that in their life. And you can take any day in Vancouver, specifically the days that are nicer where the sun comes out, but you're going to see people on the seawall, up on the mountains, out in the water, on the courts, doing physically active things. And it's also part of the reason that so many Vancouverites don't dress formally. We tend to spend a lot of time in activewear because you might be going to work, but at lunch you're going to be going to the gym, or you might be going for a run on your break, or you might just stop in on the way home at your club basketball team or beach volleyball, or heading to the beach or up onto the mountains for a hike. People are always looking for activities to do outdoors. And not only do people have the desire to do it, but you actually have the option to do it because we do live in such a mild climate. So it's possible to be outdoors. It's possible to be active all year round, which I think really astounds people from some parts of the world, you know, where in the middle of winter, it really is too cold to be outside for very long. You're not going to send your kids out to play in the middle of winter in Regina in a snowstorm. Where in Vancouver, people, no matter rain or shine, in the middle of the worst storms in winter, generally kids are sent outside at school, at lunch and at recess, because it's possible. You just have to wear a rain jacket and you go outside and you play. And I love that. And that's part of the reason, I've said this in another video, why real Vancouverites don't typically wear umbrellas. I know a lot of people took issue with it, but I'm standing by it because growing up in Vancouver, you're used to just going out with your jacket and not an umbrella. Plus, it doesn't rain that heavily most of the time. But the other thing is you're just around other people who also prioritize health and are being active. And I find it's inspiring to be surrounded by those people. And so it becomes a social activity. You don't just meet people down at the bar. You go for a run with them, or you go and play tennis with them, or you play pickup basketball. And that becomes part of your social activity. So no matter what activity you want to get into, those options exist. You know, there's really strong cultures behind all of these physical activities, and they become really strong friend networks. And I think that is one of the ways that is best to find friends in Vancouver, is to get into these physical activities, whether it's cycling or running or rock climbing or triathlon or what have you. You're going to find, if you get involved in hobbies like this, that it becomes really easy to connect with people, because that is where people are socializing so much in Vancouver. But aside from that physical activity, there's also the health side and just good food. And Vancouver is a place where you're going to find options, no matter what kind of diet you might get into, whether it's whole foods or you're a vegetarian or you only want to eat seafood, or whether you're into the paleo diet or whatever it happens to be, you're going to be able to find also a home in Vancouver and a place that provides food that you need to sustain yourself. Because of the way that people prioritize health and fitness, people are spending money on those activities. And there's a lot of services, a lot of restaurants, a lot of grocery stores that cater to it. And you're going to find it's a place where it's easy to make healthy decisions when you have all of these options before you, and the good influence of all the people that are surrounding you who are also into these things. The music and comedy scene is another thing that I love about Vancouver. My wife loves going to live shows. And so in our relationship, we spend a lot of time going to live shows. And it is something that I really enjoy about Vancouver that I haven't seen in many other places that I've been in, quite to the extent that we have. I would argue that Vancouver sort of punches above its weight, given that the city of Vancouver is only about 700,000 people. I mean, the region has about 3 million people. But I think for so many entertainers and the people that are booking their shows, Vancouver is one or two places that they're going to choose to book a show if they're coming to Canada. Toronto almost always is going to be on that, of course. And then Vancouver is increasingly the only other option. And sometimes those acts choose Vancouver over Toronto entirely, because I think, similar to what I was saying when I was talking about people wanting to come and visit you, they know that Vancouver has an immense draw. And so if they put on a show in Vancouver, they know that people from Toronto, from Calgary, from Winnipeg, from Kelowna, from Victoria, they're all going to make an effort, if they're really into that musician or comedy act, to come to Vancouver and make a little vacation out of it. So we have a scene that I think is much beyond what our weight in the world is as a result. But I also think there's an argument to be made that our smaller venue scene isn't as vibrant as it once was. And I do think that that is something that has suffered to some extent. But there are small music scenes and small comedy shows throughout the city. The Biltmore comes to mind. It's the only one that's popping up in my mind, but I know that there are many others around Metro Vancouver. So it exists. It's perhaps not as vibrant as it once was, but I do think that it's important to note that the draw of Vancouver means that we do punch above our weight when it comes to sort of the heavyweights in the music and comedy scene. But if you're not just coming here for the music and comedy and you want to move to Vancouver and you want to buy a home, of course, I also am a realtor that has helped hundreds of families move to Vancouver, families just like yours. And whenever you are ready, be sure to reach out. I am just a phone call away or a text message. I'm happy to talk about the possibility of your family moving to Vancouver and see if we're a good fit for one another. There's never any pressure, but if you're not quite ready to do just that and you want to spend more time doing some due diligence and researching Vancouver, well, I probably have a video for that. I'm close to 100 videos now. So many videos I've made all about moving to and living in Vancouver. I love this city. I want to share it with you, and I want to make sure that you're making the right choice when you decide to move here. So be sure to check out my whole back catalog of videos. Give this video a like and a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video, so other people just like you also will be able to find this video. Don't keep it a secret. I really do appreciate you watching this video all the way to the end. Thank you for sticking with me. I do want to suggest one more video that I think you're going to really enjoy, and it's this video right here. And that's a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek exploration of Metro Vancouver that I think is going to shed a lot of light on the region for you. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next week.